Hi, everyone. My name is Gary Carton, and I'm with Safe Kids Worldwide, and welcome to our Back to School Facebook Live. I hope you had an awesome Labor Day weekend, and now it's time to focus on back to school and getting you all the safety information you need, whether your kids are attending school in person, virtually, or some combination of the two. And we have the perfect experts, a total dream team, who are here to share simple but really useful advice on all the back to school essentials. And since we're not quite ready to let go of summer yet, we're going to have some fun along the way. We've got some chances to win Amazon gift cards, and we also have 2 books in our safety series featuring Clifford the Big Red Dog. There you see him right there. Clifford Takes a Walk, and Clifford and the Railroad Crossing. Riveting books that I highly recommend. We'll give a bunch of those away today as well. Now, before we get started, I really want to encourage you to ask questions and make comments. One of my favorite parts about these Facebook Lives is that we're all here for each other, so let's make this really, really conversational. Trust me, if you have questions, other people are probably wondering the same thing, so go ahead and ask away. Okay, let's get right to it. Our first expert is Dr. Katie Donnelly. Dr. Donnelly is an ER doctor at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. She's the medical director for Safe Kids D.C., and she's a total hero, a veteran with these Facebook Lives, dedicating her life to children and families, and we're so grateful for all she does. Thank you, Dr. Donnelly, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Gary. You always give me the best introduction.
You deserve that and more. And speaking of deserving that and more, our next guest is a first-time visitor, is Buck Russell Sr. And we're so excited to have Buck. He is a public safety manager for Union Pacific Railroad. He started his career with Union Pacific as a locomotive engineer 23 years ago. And before doing that, he served in the U.S. Air Force and was a police officer in South Texas. He also has 3 children and 2 grandchildren. So he knows about safety from just about every possible perspective. Buck, we really appreciate it. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
And finally, our last expert is Jennifer Tran. Jennifer is a physician assistant in Children's National Hospital Emergency Department and a proud part of Safe Kids DC. She made sure to stress the word proud. Aside from working on the front lines to battle COVID-19, she also serves on the hospital's occupational health COVID-19 response team to protect the spread of the virus in their pediatric hospital system. Thanks so much, Jennifer, for being here and for all the work that you've done for children and families.
Happy to be here with everybody.
Okay, so Jennifer, let's get started. Let's get started with you, because this is back to school, but in addition to all the work that you do in the ER, you're also, as we said, on the front lines of COVID, and you have been since the very beginning. This is a tricky time for parents. Obviously, they're figuring out all the back to school do's and don'ts, and we'll get to those in a second. But in the meantime, they're also trying to navigate COVID and what that means for keeping their kids safe. I know, as we discussed, this is a big time question. We could probably do a whole Facebook Live on this. But are there some basic tips parents should know when they're considering how concerned they should be about their kids being exposed?
Gary, I'm with you. I think we should have dedicated like a full hour and a half, maybe 3 hours to this, because I'm sure there'll be 30,000 questions to come afterwards. I think at this point, every parent knows that bringing your kids back into school is definitely going to increase the child's risk of exposure to COVID and pretty much any other contagious illness at this point. More human interactions equals higher risk of exposure. That's a fact. That being said, as somebody who works in pediatrics and who also works in public health, I am in 100% full support of schools opening back up again safely. Yes, COVID is one big problem we have to worry about right now, but I do also think about the emotional and mental health impact of kids not being in school, and then also the downstream effects of lack of social engagement that it can have on the growth and development of children. So with all of that, there are known safe and effective parameters that caregivers can take to help their kids safely go back to school. So obviously, number one, and I feel like we say this all the time and everybody knows this, masking helps, okay? So that's like a big clear one. Masking helps. This is why everybody across the schools are saying you should do it, and it's usually protocol for most schools. But make sure your kid has a mask when they go into school, and I would strongly suggest taking 1 or 2 extra and keeping it in their backpack in case the first one gets dirty. Remind your kids also on top of that to wash their hands regularly, especially before snack breaks or before eating lunch. And most definitely on top of that, I would empower their teachers as well as your own kids to teach each other the same thing. Everyone shouldn't just do it for themselves, especially when you're dealing with something like a pandemic that has a contagion risk and can spread to other people. And so in these situations, they should really be looking out for each other while at school. And don't forget the one other thing, that's probably my last one. The American Academy of Pediatrics does recommend the COVID-19 vaccination for all adolescents 12 years of age or older who don't have any contraindications. I would strongly encourage any parent who is hesitant and their child is of age to talk to their pediatrician about it, because every case is different. But I do know for a lot of my friends who have older kids, it has really put a lot of ease to them knowing that their kids can go back into school with this added layer of protection of the vaccine.
That's all really, really good advice. And you make it, what I like is you make it sound like everything else. Of course, there are these risks, but at the same time, there are things parents can do. But we know these are concerns. And the reason I know is about to read, we have a comment in that I just want to bring up right now since it's relevant. And it says, my biggest concern is the lack of social distancing and lack of being able to contact trace and lack of sanitizing workstations when changing classes. Am I right to be concerned? And what can I do about it? It sounds like you answered that a little bit already, but the reason I wanted to bring that up is because I think it does address the kind of stress that this is putting on parents. And is there anything you can say when she says, am I right to be concerned? What would you say to parents to kind of put them at ease a little bit?
I would say most definitely you should be concerned because you are a parent and that is your job as a parent, right?
Good, yeah.
And every decision we make, whether or not that's wearing a helmet, crossing the street safely, going back into school in the middle of a pandemic, everything that we do, you're always weighing your risks and your benefits, right? And as I already said, I do think kids should definitely be going back to school, just more so for the social engagement and growth and development. But of course, use the safety precautions that I already discussed. And then you can also teach your kids to clean their desks on their own, bring their own wipes with them, kind of give them enough safeguards for themselves to actually use so that they can move forward and have as safe of an environment as possible. It's not impossible that they will get COVID if they do all these things, but it definitely mitigates that risk, and that's the most important part. I also would suggest that it doesn't hurt to even ask the school what their infection control measures and precautions are to prevent against the spread of COVID. I mean, they're your kids. You should definitely feel empowered as a parent to know what the school is and isn't doing. But also on top of that, you want to be able to limit the risk of COVID exposure while they're at school, and having the right answers as to what the next steps are, so you know, is going to make you feel a lot more at ease in the middle of all of this. And I would say my last thing in comment to that, this is not necessarily advice, but I'm hoping it does put more parents at ease. I'm sure anybody right now who has watched any of the news or read any news articles as of recently has noticed that there has been an increase in COVID numbers of pediatric cases across the US. I can promise you for a fact, and Dr. Donnelly can confirm this as well, we have definitely felt the impact in our pediatric emergency departments. But I do want to say with some reassurance, just based on data from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the weekly data that they put out, there hasn't actually been an increase in the percentage of rates of kids who are being hospitalized or dying from COVID. So from at least what we know so far, even with kids going back into school, if they were to catch COVID, they seem to have more mild illness from COVID, more so than what adults are facing now.
That's really good information to know. And like you said, there's so much more to know, but just the fact that this is the latest and some tips that parents could do, I think is great. And so thanks so much, Jennifer. That was terrific. And I've heard you and Dr. Donnelly say many times that one of the things about COVID is we focus on COVID, but then we don't focus on the really tips that we would normally have with back to school. So we want to move to that area a little bit. And we know that getting to and from school can be a big deal for kids. And that's some ways that they get injured. They can be seriously injured as well. And we want parents to be vigilant in that area as well. So Dr. Donnelly, let's bring you in for that. What tips do you have for parents, whether their kids are biking, walking, or riding to school?
So I think one of the big things I want to talk about with families is show your kids the right thing and practice it, practice it, practice it. So if they're going to ride the bike to school, ride that bike with them the first couple times, do some dry runs. So they know exactly where they're going, how to get there, how to do it safely, and wear a helmet. And you wear a helmet too, parents. Kids love to see that you're doing the right thing too, and they want to model what you're doing. If they're going to walk to school, again, practice it. Drill into them. Look left, look right, look left again. I have one of my colleagues at Safe Kids DC just said her 3-year-old is able to do this on her own as she's walking to school. So your kid can do it too. And then something I do personally, and I train my nephews in, is when you're crossing the street in the crosswalk, make eye contact with the driver. Get that acknowledgement that you know that they see you before you step foot into the crosswalk. That can really help keep our kids safe as they're biking, walking, scooting, skating, however they're going to get to school so they can be safe.
That is awesome advice. And what I really like about that is things you can do together to practice ahead of time. So on the weekend, do a dry run to school or practice looking left. It's kind of a fun activity you can do together, but also teaching them safety from an early age that they will hopefully use the rest of their lives. And I actually see a question that is also a great point. Any advice for kids who take the bus to school? I was walking the other day and I saw a busload of kids just heading off they just were cramming onto the bus. Is there any advice you have for how to stay safe when they're taking the bus?
Oh yeah. So let's remember that buses are big vehicles, and it is hard for the bus driver to see around them. So in general, I say the kids who are getting on a bus, stay at least 2 big steps back from the bus until that bus has come to a full stop and the doors have opened. That's the sign from the bus driver that it's safe to approach the bus. And then when you're on that bus, if that bus has seatbelts, you're wearing your seatbelt. If that bus doesn't have seatbelts, you're staying in your seat at all times. The bus can be really fun when you're on it with your friends, but we need to be being respectful of the bus driver and being safe. And that's the safest way we're going to get to school.
Perfect. So talking to your kids about that again from an early age, making them that's the rules when you get on the bus can make a big difference as they get older too.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Donnelly. I think this is a great time for a giveaway. So here's how the giveaways are going to work. I'm going to ask a question, and you can answer with either an A, B, C, or D in the comments. We'll do a random drawing for anyone who gets the right answer to the question. So here is the first question. What age group is currently at greatest risk for an unintentional pedestrian injury? Answer the choices are A, 3 to 5-year-olds, B, 5 to 10-year-olds, C, 10 to 12-year-olds, or D, teenagers. Give everyone a few seconds to put their answers in the comments. A, B, C, or D. Okay, we've got some B's there. A lot of B's. Okay, I have not talked to our expert on this, but we're going to bring him in. So Jennifer, let's bring you in because I can see you right now. What do you think the answer is?
Isn't this cheating though? Because I used everybody else's answer. I don't want to go against the crowd. I feel like the answer has to be B.
Well, a lesson I learned in college about going against the crowd, I would recommend everyone, and you should have done it there. The answer is actually D. Teenagers.
Yeah. Teenagers.
Yes, it's just changed over the last several years. We did a study on this. The teenagers are now the group that is currently at greatest risk. I think we could probably figure out the reasons why with cell phones and putting their heads in cell phones. So something to talk about your teenagers. I know they're anxious to probably listen to everything else adults say. Talk to them about putting their phones down when they are crossing the street. Okay, so thank you so much. Anyone who put D will be entered in to win the drawing. And that brings us to Buck Russell. Buck, I'm so glad that you're with us today because this is a huge issue with kids, especially teenagers, again, getting injured, even killed when they're on or near train tracks. And this is also something that most people do not talk, most parents don't talk to their kids about. A lot of us live really close to train tracks. Some of us don't live as close, but we travel across them all the time. So maybe we should start at the beginning since this is an issue that's not talked about much. Buck, why is this such a big issue, and what are the biggest issues that cause these preventable injuries?
Well, you mentioned one already. With the answer being teens is what they're holding in their hands. A cell phone. They're paying attention to the activity on the phone. They think they can hear a train coming. They think they can feel a train coming. Trains are deceptively quiet. We don't have the big poofs of smoke. We don't have the clickety-clack. We're not necessarily sounding the horn. We only sound the horn at public roadways and a designated number of private crossings. So you can't count on the horn. And you're paying attention to your phone. You have noise-canceling headphones in your ears. And next thing you know, a train has snuck up on you and you could possibly lose your life. Or an injury so severe it changes the life that you currently have. It's just the only place to be on the train tracks is at a designated crossing, going directly over the train tracks at a designated crossing. The same spots where you have cars or a designated pedestrian crossing. There are no shortcuts, and there's no that the railroad allowed me to be here. It just doesn't happen.
Got it. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. Teens and all of us really, you see a train track, it seems a piece of cake. You're going to take a shortcut or just walk along it like in the movies. But there's a lot more to it than the movies. And as you just brought up some of those really important issues. We have a question here that is a tough one. I'm going to ask you though, Buck, before we get to this question. You were an engineer for 23 years. What was that like? What was it like driving a train?
Oh, it's a kick in the pants. It's absolutely fun. I mean, it is a blast. I can't believe they pay you to do it. You know, to be able to move all of that weight. You think the weight, one locomotive weighs in the area 500,000 pounds. But when we see somebody or something on the track and we hit the emergency brakes, there's nothing else we can do. Just lay on the horn, and it can take the average 12 million pound train traveling at only 55 miles an hour, a mile or more to come to a stop. That's 18 football fields back to back to back before that train can come to a stop. And then unfortunately in that time, you know, somebody could be injured before the train stops.
Well, that's actually a question that we have, and it is a difficult situation, but I'll ask you the question. Have you ever been involved in or heard of any incidents involving trains? Has this ever happened to you?
Well, unfortunately, about every 3 hours, the Federal Railroad Administration tells us that somebody or a vehicle is struck by a train in the United States. Now, in my 13 years of running trains, I unfortunately struck 2 trespassers and 1 vehicle. And it's something you never forget. And one of those was a 19-year-old, and she was on a bridge and there was nowhere for her to go. It's just something you never forget. You live with it. It's like being in a nightmare, but you don't wake up. You hear it, you feel the impact, and you know somebody's life and their loved one's lives have changed for the worst.
And it's like you said, we think about it, and their family and their community, you know, there can be nothing worse for a family. But at the same time, it's got to be a really, really difficult situation for the engineers because, like you said, you see them there, you're a mile away, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do to stop it. I can't imagine, you know, that feeling. And like you said, it stays with you forever.
It's life-changing for them. You never forget, you know, what the person was wearing, what crossing, the time of day, the holidays that are near. My first incident, unfortunately, was the day before Father's Day. And like when you introduced me, you know, I have 3 children, and it's just, God, I just couldn't imagine losing a loved one, you know, one of my babies, you know, the day before Father's Day. And the crews, you know, Union Pacific, we're truly blessed that we have a robust program that we get the crews off the train. We, you know, see any counseling they need to deal with what they just witnessed. They go to work to earn a living for their families and build America. They don't go to work to be involved where somebody may possibly lose their life.
And speaking of Union Pacific, another thing in addition to that is I think that seems like they put so much time and energy into these safety messages and advising families. And it's something parents don't talk about enough, but we're trying to change that and really make sure that parents, whether you live near train tracks, whether you don't, talk to your children about this. A lot of them don't know some of this information, and by just letting them know the information, they can make better decisions. So thank you so much for dedicating. I know that you're in charge of that, or a big part of it too, Buck. So thank you so much for dedicating your life to that as well. And that actually brings us a perfect segue to another giveaway, right?
All right.
So this is an interesting one as well. So here's the question, fill in the blank. Trains are at least X feet wider than the tracks on either side. This is something I did not know that was really, really interesting. So trains are at least X feet wider than the tracks on either side. A, 1 foot, B, 6 inches, 3 feet, or D, 10 feet. Okay. Let's see.
I have an answer for this one.
What's that, Jennifer?
Pick me.
I have an answer for this one.
You do have an answer?
Pick me.
I actually wanted to ask Buck though, because I think this is like a big thing too. How far ahead can you see? Not that you need to relive any of these 3 situations, but how far ahead can you see in general when there is an obstruction ahead of you? Because if it takes a mile for the train to stop.
It's just like driving a car. You know, your field of vision, what you can see out the window of your car is what the train crew can see, you know, down the tracks, you know, and just like your car, you have curves, you have hills that, you know, may obstruct your view also. And at night, you can see to the end of the headlights, just driving a car. And you don't overdrive your headlights when you're driving a car. But train, you're going a designated speed on that track for that type of train. And then all of a sudden there's somebody or something there, and you hit the emergency brakes. It can take a mile or more to come to a stop.
Right.
Crazy.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. So Jennifer, she's hogging the questions, but I have to give her a shot. I'm a sucker for this. So Jennifer, I'll tell you what. You can give this answer. If you get it right, we'll do a drawing for the person to get the Amazon gift card. And if you get it right, everyone else will get the 2 Clifford books.
Okay.
So
That's
no
fair.
pressure. So I hope you've done you seem super smart. I don't know if you did your research. So what do you think?
No,
A, B,
this is my best guess, just having been on a train before, and I feel like the 6-inch and 1 foot is too small and 10 is too wide, just given the size of what a train track is. So I'm going to go with 3.
Buck, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, good work.
Trains
Good
are
work,
at least
Jennifer.
they hang over the rail by at least 3 feet, but some trains have extraordinary, heavy and wide loads that, we had to go on special routes and stuff like that. So 3 is definitely a good rule of thumb, but there's some trains that are even wider than that.
That is still really wide, though, because that means 6 total, right? Because it's 3 in either direction.
Yes.
And it's why some people take selfies and they think they see the train coming and they're out of the way, and they're surprised at how much space the train takes up.
And
So
some people, they'll walk down the middle of the tracks, they'll see a train coming, and then they'll walk on the end of the ties. Well, they're in that 3-foot red zone.
right.
Oh,
Man.
Their
Okay,
life may
cool.
change.
Well, let's keep spreading the word for sure.
Yes, please.
Okay, well, let's keep moving now. Now that we know how to get to school safely, we know how to walk, bike, bus, by trains, let's talk a little bit about home safety, because we're not going to go back to COVID necessarily, but there are kids will be going to school. Some of them might be home. Parents still have so much going on. They're juggling many different priorities at once. Let's go with Jennifer or Katie here. Is there some basic overall advice that parents should know to keep their kids safe at home when they can't necessarily be, when they're on the phones or working or doing whatever, watching their kids 100% of the time? Any kind of quick tips?
One of the big things we saw in the pandemic were kids getting into medications and cleaning products that they shouldn't have gone into because they weren't able to be supervised as well as they used to be. So I always stress the up and away messaging, which is keep those cleaning products, medications, hand sanitizers, anything a kid can get into that you don't want them to get into, up above head height, away as in closed door that has a lock on it. So it's both out of sight, kids can't see it and aren't tempted, and they can't get at it. So that's my one of my big messages. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Jen.
Well,
Yeah.
I know Dr. Donnelly, I know my daughter, she saw the laundry pods. They look like candy, and I had to explain to her what they were.
Yep, and there are a lot of medicines and cleaning products that look very tempting to children, from gummy vitamins to laundry pods to dish detergent dispensing capsules that if you put them side by side with a Jujube or a Red Hot would look very similar. So kids can't tell the difference between medicine and cleaning products and candy. So always assume if it looks like it could be tasty, it probably does look tasty.
And I would definitely say, too, always have Poison Control's number on hand. Always.
I was hoping you were going to say that because I loaded up the number here. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, 1-800-222-1222. I will tell you, in the hospital system, that's even usually our first call when there is an ingestion, unexpected ingestion. Obviously, you should do as much as you can from the home to try to prevent that from happening, but you just never know, right? You think you have the cleaning supplies out, you take a phone call, you walk away, and 2 seconds later, kids are fast, super fast. 2 seconds later, they're into whatever it is. So definitely try your best to keep everything away, but if you can't, always have Poison Control's number on hand.
Yeah, and I like these advice because they're things you can do ahead of time. Again, we want parents to supervise kids, but with everything going on, everyone's just doing the best that they can. So you put the stuff away, you kind of do the preparation first. That helps. And you have this number, it can really save you a lot of time and energy by going to experts who know what to do. They'll give you the first steps, and it makes life a lot easier. So something you can do right now is just put the Poison Help number into your phone or on your refrigerator, I guess. Okay, cool. So let's go to one more question before we open it up for questions. We'll go to one more, giveaway before we open it up for questions. So here's the question. This is kind of a tribute to all the teachers out there. Please know we are supporting you. People like Jennifer and Dr. Donnelly who are on the front lines, you're amazing, and teachers are equally amazing. So here's the question. Let's see just how amazing they are. What percentage of teachers have used their own money to purchase school supplies, food, or warm clothes for their students? Either A, more than 90%, B, 50%, C, 25%, or D, 10%. Let's see here. Everybody take a few minutes.
I have a sister and some aunts and some cousins who are all teachers, so I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this one.
Okay, we're going to let you do the one. You had to jump in there quickly or Jennifer would try to answer it again. I can see
I had to get one in.
Yeah, she wants to be in a game show or something, which is good. I love the enthusiasm. Okay, so Katie, what do you think?
I'm going to guess, knowing the teachers in my life, it's A, more than 90%.
That is absolutely correct. More than 90% of teachers spend their own money to help out children in one way or another. So teachers, again, anyone who's out there, anyone who knows a teacher, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for all that you do in so many different ways. So thank you for that. Okay, so let us now open it up for questions. We have a few that came in early. Let's see. Here's one. Oh, here's one about, I guess, pedestrian safety as well. So, Dr. Donnelly, why don't you take this one? What can drivers do, and Jennifer, you can jump in as well, especially with more kids walking around? So we talked about before and after school, we talked about kids and being alert and things like that. Drivers, I'm sure they're rushing. They're distracted. Dr. Donnelly, any advice for drivers on how to be particularly safe?
Well, I think it's always a good reminder to, one, slow down, follow the speed limit, and start practicing awareness again. I mean, we've gone like a year and a half without kids walking or biking to school, and we have lost that habit of looking for pedestrians, of looking for bikers, and it's really important that we start training our minds again to do that work. And like as Ms. Dowford said, slow down. You know, especially if you're around a playground or a school or a hospital or a shopping center. You know, the places where there's lots of kids and parents and people walking around. Go slow. 5 minutes more on your commute will not make or break you. And stay off your cell phone. Yes.
Perfect.
And always yield the right of way to a train.
What was that?
Yes.
What was that?
Always yield the right of way to a train.
That's a great. Actually, it's so funny. We have a question. I'm going to get to this one. This was the second one, but I'm going to do it now. I have to admit, I'm sometimes tempted to cruise around those gates. This is not me talking, by the way. When I'm waiting a long time for a train, how risky is that? And it seems crazy because we're talking about all this, but it is. You're sitting there, you're the front person, you're looking right, left, nothing's coming. I'm sure you have experience with this, Buck. What can you tell parents to say, listen, it might seem like a good idea because you're going to save some time, but please, please, please don't do it.
The road is barricaded. It's the same as turn around, don't drown. The road is barricaded for a safety reason. And this reason is there's a train coming. You know, on the crossing arm itself, there's 2 flashing red lights, and at the very end of that crossing arm is a solid red stoplight. It is a stop condition. Don't go. You know, and the risk, it could cost you your life or a passenger's life. You know, it's just horrific. Don't go. The road is closed. Just wait for the train to pass or find an alternate route that goes over or under the train tracks.
And what about a driver who says, I understand that, but and this goes for pedestrians too, who think that, well, I'm going to see a train coming, I'm pretty fast, I can just get out of the way. Or drivers like, I know, but the car moves pretty fast, that train's way far away, I think I can beat this.
Trains are pretty darn big, you know.
Yeah.
Say a train's about, 18 feet tall, 16 feet tall. You know, they're huge pieces of machinery that are almost 75 feet long. You may look down the tracks and, that train's just barely moving. But actually, that train could be doing about 70 miles an hour. It's the same thing when you look at an airplane landing at the airport. That airplane's doing about 150 miles an hour coming in for a landing, but it looks like it's about to fall out of the sky. We create an optical illusion, and we fool your brain to thinking we're barely moving. Now, if somebody says, well, the gates are down and they're not going up and I don't see a train, speaking of emergency numbers, there's an emergency number at every single railroad crossing. It has the dispatching railroad's toll-free number, the crossing ID, and the dispatching railroad at that crossing. And you can report what you believe may be a malfunction of the crossing arms. You know, never risk your life or a loved one's life and go around the crossing arms.
And do you always have that sign near your desk, or do you know
I always do.
for that? Just no matter what, you have it by your desk.
Always thinking of it.
Okay, perfect. We love it. We love it. Okay, sounds great. Here's another question we have, and this goes back to, I guess, part COVID, but also part home safety. Jennifer, you gave some great advice about kids can clean their desk and things like that. Is it safe for a child to carry their own hand sanitizers and cleaning wipes with them to school? And if they do, any type of precautions they can take?
Yeah, I think that's always a hard one. So there are some that are child safe. Are they as effective? That's probably the questionable part in terms of hand sanitizers and wipes. Some will argue something is better than nothing, but I would definitely be very particular about the age and the conversation you have with your child first, right? Just like Katie was saying, you can lock up all the candy and you can lock, or what looks like candy, lock up all these things. But if a kid has an idea that they think that it's something safe or they think that it's candy, they're a little chasing after it. And one of the first things you should always have is that conversation with your child. Beyond just the safety of the conversation with your own child and feeling like they are safe enough and old enough to be able to use these things, you also want to be very cautious of them recognizing that they may be around younger kids who don't necessarily know that these things aren't toys, who don't necessarily know that these things aren't candy and that not to put them in their mouths. And so being very cautious of not just their own practical use for themselves, but also cautious of the other kids that are around them to be able to make sure they keep it safe away from the kids. Something that may even be safer that most schools can consider and most parents can consider is just making sure their kids are taking it to school to hand to the teacher. And the teacher has it in an accessibly safe space for all the kids to have access to whenever they need it.
Great. Thank you so much. And we have some other comments here. I want to get them on here about this is back to what drivers can do. Drivers always play a big issue too, and that backing up and driveway, that is a big deal. You gotta roll your window down, look both ways, because those kids are sneaky, like we said.
I would say to Lawrence's comment too, just aside from just driveways and playgrounds and schoolyards, I know we all talk about going slower. Something else people should also be doing too is they should be turning down their music. I feel like that's a big one that people miss, especially because there is an acute, if you can't see it, but you can hear it, there's also an opportunity for you to be able to respond to that too. And people miss out on that.
Great. And here's a good one. Josh, thank you so much. This is a great question. What's the purpose of calling poison control? I would think it would be smarter to get to a hospital first. So, Katie, Jennifer,
I can take it.
I'm sure you're both dying to do this one.
There are definitely times where your child ingests something and you should call 911. And those are if your child passes out, they're having a hard time breathing, they're throwing up uncontrollably, they're visibly in distress. You don't wait, you call 911. But luckily, there are lots and lots of things that kids can get into that aren't that harmful. And you don't know, and sometimes I don't even know until I call poison control, and I'm like, oh, what about this gummy? So a lot of times they can look it up in their manual of every toxic ingestion known to man and say, actually, based on what you're telling me of what they ate and how long it's been and what they're doing, you can safely stay at home and save yourself the time and energy and cost of an emergency.
Jennifer, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would also say too, sometimes there are things that you can do from home acutely in that very moment that can mitigate from things getting worse. And a lot of times too, I think the first thought that most parents have is like, run it under the sink and take everything directly in the sink and give it water, water, water. But there are some things that actually cause adverse reactions in terms of mixing things. And so before you get too excited in one end of doing things at home, I would always call poison control first. But again, on the reverse side, poison control can actually give you acute things to do before you even make it to the hospital that can actually protect a kid. And so having that as your front line is always one of the safer things to do.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And lots of great comments here for all your tips about rail safety coming in. So we really appreciate that. Keep those tips coming in. Yeah, crossing the train tracks and the viaduct on the tracks is always a big deal. So thank you so much for these questions. We are going to do one more giveaway, and this time we're going to let Buck answer it. So I'm going to say that ahead of time. But I've got like 50 more questions for you, Jennifer. So if you hang on, we'll do rapid fire afterwards. So here's the last question. This is kind of a fun one too, hopefully. Let's see. There is a real school in the Philippines that is made entirely of recycled what? Uh-oh, I heard Buck exhale. Don't try Googling this either. Here we go. A, newspaper. B, pop bottles. C, popsicle sticks. And D, hubcaps. I like the idea of recycling. This is a tough one. So let's give everyone a few seconds. You can look at the comments if you want. A lot of people saying B. A lot of people saying B. Okay, so Buck, same thing with you. Although we already did give everyone books, so I guess we don't have to do that again. The winner of this will again get a $25 Amazon gift card. So Buck, what do you think?
I'm going to go with B. I believe it's going to be pop bottles.
You
I
are
really
a
don't
smart
believe
man.
A.
You are absolutely true. That is absolutely correct. Thank you so much. You're absolutely right. Well, let me just check for last second questions, but I think we got them all. And so thank you so much, everybody. That is the end of our Facebook Live. We really, really appreciate your time. First and foremost, thanks so much to our speakers. You are the best to talk to. I love talking to you during rehearsals and during this live. I was so appreciative of all your expertise and how well
you're giving away the magic, Gary. We don't rehearse this.
Right. And your ability, it's really my rehearsal. You guys just sit around and listen to me babble. But also thank you so much to all the parents and caregivers out there. If you take one thing away from today, please know you're not alone. We gave lots of information. You don't have to have that memorized. There's lots of resources on safekids.org. There's blogs with a lot of this back to school information with tips about rail safety. There's videos about talking to your teens about crossing the street while looking at their phones. So check on all that. And good luck. We're with you all the way. Stay safe. Have a great year. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.